Hello my bookish friends, welcome to the channel. Today we are doing my book journal setup for the book series Bridgerton. Interested in seeing how I put these goodies to use? Stick around. Hello all my bookish friends, welcome back. With the new Bridgerton spin-off coming out, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to talk about my thoughts on the series that launched it all. The Bridgerton novel series by Julia Quinn. This is a Regency-era historical romance. It is 8 novels long and features the 8 children of the Bridgerton family. Each book highlights a different sibling in their journey for love and romance. Their parents were very happy in love in their marriage, and because they are the Viscount and the Viscountess, they have the privilege of encouraging their children to do the same. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing in my spread, talk about each of the books in the series, talk about my likes and dislikes about each book, as well as my overall thought on the series. So to start out, I am stamping some flowers on the side here and cutting out the flowers, and the thought is to get some flowers layered behind it. Book 1 of the Bridgerton series is The Duke and I. This features the oldest Bridgerton daughter, Daphne, who is the 3rd child born to the family, and Simon, the Duke of Hastings, who also happens to be her oldest brother's best friend from school. In the books, Daphne is the buddy. She is very low-key and down to earth. She's easy to talk to. She's got a lot of brothers. She grew up with the 2 older brothers and the 1 brother who's just 1 step down from her. So she's immersed with 3 brothers all around her age that she has grown up palling around with. This makes her extremely comfortable around men, and men extremely comfortable around her. Unfortunately, when it comes time to find a husband, that makes her less appealing, because when the gentlemen of the ton are talking to her, they feel very comfortable. There's no mystique to her. They feel at ease and relaxed, and don't see her as a love interest or a conquest. They see her as a pal. By the time Simon comes to town, she's already been out for, I believe, 2 seasons. She had a couple offers that were inappropriate, either too old or too young, just not a good fit. Enter Hastings. He is a confirmed bachelor and has decided he's never going to marry, and then he meets this woman. He's instantly attracted to her, sort of indulges the fantasy of her, before discovering she is his best friend's sister. And then there's that internal struggle of, oh no, this is not an option. I cannot consider this. I cannot defile my best friend's sister. I can't do that. I'm not that much of a rake. Rake though he may be. This is a really beautiful friends to lovers trope. I really enjoy the way she solidly builds up a friendship before something more. This is a spicy romance, so if you're not into the romance genre, this might not be the series for you. I think the slow burn is beautifully done. I think the way they start as friends and turn up the passion is really beautifully done. I was in it with them every step of the way. Really, really well done. Book 2 is The Viscount Who Loved Me, and that is Anthony, the oldest Bridgerton child, and his love interest is Kate. This one is an enemies to lovers trope. These two meet and instantly there's chemistry, but they also rub each other the wrong way from almost the get-go. In a lot of ways, that's largely because the two of them are so incredibly similar, and all they can see in each other is the things that they probably like least about themselves, which I think is a perfect way to start an enemies to lovers, because it makes that transition so much more realistic that, the things that bother them are the things that make them alike and the things they end up bonding over. Anthony has had to take care of all of his family because when his father passed away, when they were very young, his mom fell apart. She was madly in love with her father and pregnant, and so she ended up just going to pieces. And he had to pick up the slack to raise the family, to take care of finances, to get mom out of bed and get her back connected to life and help try and push her to move on from her grieving stage, which was really troubling for her because she was so very much in love and she was pregnant, so hormones flying. And Kate was the oldest child in her parents' relationship as well. So when her father died, her mother also kind of fell apart, and she felt responsible to take care of her younger sister and her mother. So both of them have the weight of the world on their shoulders. Kate also has some PTSD from some childhood trauma, which makes her terrified of storms. One of the moments that bring these two together, there's a storm that she is just terrified of, and he takes care of her through it. And that's one of the main shifting points for this couple. Now, Anthony is determined he is not going to marry for love because he believes he's doomed to die young. How could he possibly live longer than this man that he feels is like the greatest man who's ever lived? He's constantly comparing himself to his father. He doesn't want to fall in love because he doesn't want to love someone and then leave them to fall apart the way his mother fell apart. It is a very noble idea. When trauma happens when you're young, it tends to freeze you at the age of that trauma. He was a very young man, far too young to be considering marriage when his father passes away. And so it's not really surprising that he has some difficulties around his mortality and around the idea of love and marriage. So those feelings starting to rise up, he is avoidant. That is his way of dealing with this. Not going to happen. I'm not going to fall in love. I'm not going to touch this woman. I'm not going to get close to this woman. I need to stay away from her. This is a bad situation. I refuse. Not going to happen. Stay away. But he can't. He's drawn to her, and that makes him furious. They are drawn to each other. And again, it is beautiful the way these two characters have this push and pull. Really believable and really enjoyable to read. Book 3 is An Offer from a Gentleman, and this is Benedict and Sophie's story. Benedict is the second son of the Bridgerton family, and he is the artist. He is the one who writes poetry and believes in love, wants love, is going to find it, and he's going to wait for it. He knows it exists. He's seen his parents' life, and he is determined that nothing shy of that kind of love will induce him into matrimony. This is the Cinderella trope. Sophie is the illegitimate daughter of a count. He takes responsibility for her without acknowledging her paternity, and just calls her his ward, takes care of her physically, but ignores her in all other ways. Makes sure she's got an education, makes sure she has dresses and is cared for, but gives her none of his actual attention. When he finally marries, the woman he marries has 2 daughters from a previous marriage. He agrees to marry and take them on with the understanding that his ward will be taking classes with them. This infuriates the new wife, who feels that her daughters deserve every luxury and that this will never do. He dies and leaves a clause in his will that if the wife wants the maximum amount of money, she needs to take care of Sophie. And there's like this secret clause Sophie doesn't know about, so she remains with the family, not understanding that her stepmother is keeping her for her own personal gain, but feels indebted to her, that she has nowhere else to go, that her father left no concessions for her, and that she's just been abandoned and has nothing. So she stays, always assuming that when she turns 18, her stepmother's going to kick her out. All her things are taken from her. She ends up being relegated to some crappy servant's quarters. Again, think Cinderella. Unfortunately, she does not have a fairy godmother who swoops in and takes care of all of this. What she does have is the love of the household staff. So there's a ball at the Bridgerton house. It is the to-do of the season, and everyone gets invited except her. The staff pull out an old trunk that belonged to her grandmother, help get her all dressed up with a mask, and say, "Go on, have a night out. You've earned it. So off she goes, without another thought, gets all dolled up, and goes to the ball. She is a smash. Everyone's automatically recognizing everyone else, and then in walks Sophie, daring to be different, in a dated silver dress. And she is stunning and radiant and magical, captures the attentions of all and the heart of one Benedict Bridgerton. Benedict is used to being called the second son, or the second Bridgerton. And so when Sophie seems not to recognize him immediately because of the mask, he says, "I'm the second one." And she's all, "Bully for you." They have a magical evening together. Benedict feels like he has instantly fallen in love and wants to marry this woman. She, annoyingly, won't give him her name or any other identifying features and runs off, leaving behind a glove. Now, this is a torturous story because he doesn't run out and find her the next day. He looks for years before they connect again. The only real problem I have with this story is that when they connect again, he does not place her as the mystery woman from the ball. Years have gone by, both of them have changed, and he's started to give up hope of ever finding this woman, but there's still this sort of whisper at the back of his mind that she was the perfect woman no one else is ever really going to compare. And so when he starts falling in love with Sophie, he can't distinguish the one from the other. He meets her as a servant, well-educated, but still not of his class, and so doesn't propose marriage. He instead asks her to be his mistress. Even though she is of a lower class, she does not want to compromise herself and be a mistress. She wants to be married, she wants to have a family, and so she refuses him. That's the only part I have issue with, is this whole, he falls in love with her, but he's holding on to this other person. He keeps arguing with himself, saying he's given up on it, and so even though he's feeling love for Sophie, there's this perfect woman in the back of his head that he's holding on to. Next we have Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. This is Colin and Penelope's story. Colin is the fourth Bridgerton child. He has a lot of insecurities because he feels all his siblings have a thing, and he doesn't have a thing. And all he ever gets commented on is his good looks, his good connections, and that's it. He feels like he's got nothing to offer. He doesn't really have a thing. So this is really upsetting for him. It makes him feel less than. He gets called out in the gossip column as being just beautiful and having no substance beyond that. And this makes him feel incredibly insecure. Penelope has been in love with Colin since the first time she met him when she was just a girl, and it has just bloomed. And Colin never sees her as anything but a friend, as a confidant, as a buddy or a pal. And she pines for him for years. She ends up finding out his talent and encourages him to follow it. He ends up finding out her secret and encourages her to hide it. And in this keeping of each other's secrets and being each other's confidant, they bond over this. Suddenly she's able to be more free and more relaxed because she's getting to know him and he's getting to know her, and he's always looked out for her and seen her as important and almost an extension of his family. He tries to support her and help her and protect her. One day they get into an argument, which leads to being a little hot and heavy in a carriage. And they didn't get very far because they arrived back at Penelope's house. And as he gets out of the carriage, depending on your definition of romance, either a very unromantic proposal or very romantic, depending on your cup of tea, he demands of her, "Well, are you going to marry me or what?" And she's, very funny. But he marches her into her family home and asks for her hand. It's pretty adorable because Penelope just doesn't get it at all. She doesn't at all think she's worthy of him, even though he's compromised her virtue. She doesn't think anything's going to come of it. And so when he proposes, she's like taken aback, and it's beautiful. The next book is Sir Philip with Love. This is the story of Eloise and Sir Philip Crane. Eloise is the fifth child in this family, and at this point, she was best friends with Penelope, so when Penelope and her brother married, she's happy for them. That's legitimately her sister now. but it also kind of ruins her plans a little bit. She never really cared too much about finding a man and finding a husband because she had the companionship of her best friend. Penelope was a wildflower who, well after the expectation of marriage, was still single, had never had any offers or any success on the marriage mart. And so Eloise always assumed the two of them would grow old together, and she didn't really need to find a mate or a husband because she was always going to have her best friend. And so in the wake of her brother and best friend's marriage and happiness, she is devastated. She feels lonely and sad that she's losing her best friend, but then incredibly guilty for assuming her best friend wouldn't find marriage. And so there's this turmoil going on inside her, which is beautifully written, and she starts looking for new companionship. She has always been a prolific letter writer, like pen pal of correspondence, and writing to everybody, like jotting down notes and letters to everybody and anybody for any reason she can think of. And a family member has passed away, like a distant cousin, and she sends a letter to her widower and just expressing her condolences. This was such a surprise to Sir Philip Crane, who is devastated. He's lost his wife. While it was not a love match, he has two unruly children now that desperately need a mother. The mother has passed away. He doesn't really understand how relationships work. On paper, he's thinking, I have money, I have title, I have property, and I have these children. All I need to do is find a desperate, well-bred woman to be the mother of my children, and all of my problems are solved. Done. So when he gets this letter from Eloise, he is moved by the fact that someone would take the time to write to him. And he shares his passion of botany with her by sending her back pressed flower from his garden. Eloise, who loves to write, just loves this, the fact that someone has written back and thought to give her a gift. She takes a lot of time to write to people and often gets a very short response, but never gotten like a gift before. And so she's intrigued and immediately wants to keep this correspondence going, not really thinking about romance, but more thinking of companionship. She was missing it with her best friend seeking love and getting married, and so she has this newfound companionship. Continues writing to him. After a year of correspondence, her best friend is now married, and she's just not one to wait. He proposes that she come and visit him at his home and see if they aren't well suited to each other. So she shows up out of the blue without telling her family on his doorstep and says, "Hi, I'm here, let's give it a shot." He is completely out of sorts. He did not expect her to be so pretty or to be so loud, verbose, and opinionated. And so neither of them make a terribly great first impression upon each other, and now she's at his place. This follows sort of the one-bed trope where you have two people that are housebound and kind of need to find a way to deal with each other. She could go home at any point. She's not stuck here. But to do so would mean to go home and tell her family what she did and that it failed. So she is determined to stick this out and see if there's even an inkling. The kids are monstrous. And she deals with them just fine, and things seem to be going well. But of course, it wouldn't be a romance novel if a monkey wrench wasn't thrown into the entire plan. I'll let you read the story to find out how that turns out. The next book in the series is When He Was Wicked. This is the story of Francesca Bridgerton and Michael Sterling. I had a difficult time starting out in this book because we immediately see things from the perspective of Michael Sterling, who is the cousin of Francesca Bridgerton's husband. That's right, little Francesca, off-screen from us, has found love, gotten married to a Scottish heir. He meets Francesca, instantly falls in love with her, feels a connection with her, enjoys her wit and banter and all the things that make her different from all the wilted flowers of the ton. And then he finds out this is the woman who's going to be marrying his cousin and best friend in a day and a half, and feels like crap. He stands by for a few years, really enjoying the company of this woman and hating that he enjoys the company of this woman. It's not unusual for him to be around a lot because this is his best friend. They're mates, they're buddies, they're pals. They've spent a lot of time together. Now that he's married, he stops by a lot. And so she gets really comfortable with him. They are good friends. He shares stories. Her husband ends up passing away. And one would think, hey, now he's got his chance. This is perfect. Years go by before they come together again and are kind of forced into close proximity. I found this one to be a little awkward because we're in the heads of these two people. And from his perspective, he feels such guilt, and it is such a taboo for him. And so that pain of pining for a woman you can't have, and then when she becomes available, the guilt he feels of, oh God, what if I wished this? What if I made this happen? Because I'm so powerful, the things I want, of course, are going to happen. And therefore, the fact that I wanted this woman means I killed my cousin who I love. That feels a little forced. It feels a little silly. I can understand it, but it was uncomfortable to read. And from her perspective, there's this, we were such good friends. I don't understand why you're being so hurtful to me, why you're pushing me away. I haven't done anything wrong, and I really could use a friend right now. Why is now, of all times, when you're going to abandon me? There would have been such less hurt feelings, and it would have given time to heal and fix those issues. But because they just don't talk about anything, they end up losing years. Book 7 is In His Kiss. This is the story of Hyacinth and Gareth St. Clair. Gareth is the second son in his family and therefore isn't really needed. He lives a life of frivolity and is just there basically as a backup in case anything happens to the heir. And his dad treats him as such. His dad treats him very much like he is just there to put in time and look pretty and not cause too much scandal. There is no love between these two. There is, in fact, a lot of bitterness, resentment, and hate between these two. But how do you build a trauma-filled, flawed character without throwing in those abusive parents, huh? And Hyacinth is the youngest Bridgerton. She is well-educated, she is well-read, she is very outspoken, and, unshockingly, still single. Now, she is not beyond marriageable age like her older sister was. She is simply being choosy, and she hasn't found the right person yet. She actually wants to marry, unlike her sister, but isn't in a rush. She sees how it panned out for her siblings, and she feels like her time will come when it comes. He comes into possession of the journal of a family member, but it's written in Italian. He doesn't speak Italian. He goes to see his grandmother, who Hyacinth is entertaining and having tea with, and happens to mention he's looking for an Italian translator, and she mentions that she speaks Italian. Not perfectly, so it's going to take some time for her to translate this book, but she can do it. This starts a relationship between them where they can conspire in corners at parties, and starts tongues wagging that there might be something happening here. This one is my least favorite of the series. I don't want to give the whole plot away because there are a lot of really good points in this story. It's got a lot of good parts to it. But in all of these, they bring in the passion, the love, the romance. And if they do have relations before marriage, it's because of love. In this one, he falls in love but doesn't feel confident that Hyacinth will marry him. He's afraid she'll get cold feet and back out. And he needs her to marry him and wants her to marry him. And he loves her. He does love her. But he gets in his own head about it. He seduces her and compromises her. So she, being a well-bred lady, feels like she has no choice but to marry him. But he goes into that moment knowing he's going to seduce her, not getting carried away with it like she does. And she's in love with him and the passion, pulls her into this compromised position. For him, he goes into it calculated. I'm going to seduce her today to make sure she can't back out, and therefore she just can't get cold feet and back out. I hate this because it's a cute story. The burn between them is really, really well done. But then as soon as there's this, I'm going to do this with ill intent, but I love her, but I'm going to compromise her virtue to force her to marry me, when she's already agreed to marry him. She's understandably hurt and still goes forward with marrying him. And I find that incredibly problematic and hate it. So all of the things I like about this story go out the window in that moment, and I can't get behind that couple anymore. Other people, this is their favorite book. This is the one they like the most. It's not my favorite book. Then at last, book 8 in this series is Gregory, little baby boy, who is the second from the youngest. He is actually the 7th child, but as a boy, he marries when he's a little bit older. His story is another one that I find very confusing. Gregory is on the hunt for love. He is searching for it. He is seeking for it. He is waiting for that bam moment when he's just gonna know this is the woman he's supposed to spend the rest of his life with. And it happens. Bam, he sees this woman and he's immediately struck with, that's her. That's the one. Gonna meet that woman. I'm gonna marry that woman. This is gonna happen. And it doesn't. And he's heartbroken for like 10 seconds. And then he realizes that all of the things he liked about this woman were superficial, and that he's really glad she ended up in another relationship because he doesn't really like her that much. He doesn't really know her that well. And while she's pretty and he had a gut reaction to her, he doesn't really want to spend time with her. On the other hand, he really wants to spend time with her best friend. Lady Lucinda Abernathy is the best friend, and he doesn't see it at first. They're friends. She's helping him get the girl, then realizes she's in love with him, and he realizes he's in love with her, and everything seems great, like it's moving forward, except she's promised to somebody else. This one, the plot is overly complicated. All of these conspiracies and yes I can, no I can't, yes I'd love you, no, it's a lot. It's a beautiful love story that gets way more complicated than it needs to, whereas the rest of the series has a pretty simple plot that's just beautiful and easy to enjoy. This one seemed overly complicated. If you are into all of the minutia of, oh, I want to, but I can't because of this, and there's all of these, legitimate things that come up that pull them apart, not like, oh no, lack of communication. It's a little bit of lack of communication because she doesn't tell him what's going on, but the stuff that's going on is pretty major, so I understand why she kept that to herself. Anyway, the Bridgerton series, if you're into romances without too much depravity, this is a really great series for you. It does have those spicy scenes in each book, about 3 to 5 depending on the book. But for the most part, it's these beautiful, slow burn romances that I am here for. There are a few things that, on the overall series that kind of catch me up, like some of the language that's used. In the very first book, Simon says, "I burn for you," which is this really intense, beautiful, that is a gorgeous line. But so many people use it in this series, and it feels like not something that everybody would necessarily say. Anthony gets away with using it because that's his best friend. It might have been something they've brandied about between them, maybe. Everyone else in the story that uses this phrase, they weren't there when Simon says it. They weren't there when Simon says it. They've not heard this phrase before. It should not be commonplace in every coupling. If it would have been one of the Bridgertons who said it, then carte blanche. Every Bridgerton can use it because Dad used it back in the day. The fact that it's Simon, who's not related to any of these people who uses the phrase, feels like it shouldn't be something that everybody uses. They should have their own words to describe passion. They shouldn't all use the same, "I burn for him," "I'm on fire for him." I don't love that this is just something that everybody says. Overall, I think this series is great. I love the concept of following all of the children of a blissfully happy married couple, a couple that found love and were a love match and had all of these children as an expression of that love, raise them to be happy, healthy, intelligent individual who will also seek love, not titles or fortune, and look up to their parents and are trying to find that for themselves. Honestly, I would love if she then follows the kids of these kids, because I would love to see the cousins all interacting with each other, them as part of the Ton all seeking their own happy matches. I'm here for it. I would love to see the whole Bridgerton series of the next generation. Please, Julia Quinn, bring it to us. I would read the heck out of all of those. So if any of this sounds interesting, go forth and read, my friends. Check them out. They're worth a read if this is your jam. I know this was a really long one, even though it was a very simple spread, but there's a lot of books, man, and I had thoughts. So there you have it. I'm going to try and edit this down as much as I can. Have a wonderful day, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend or your day, depending on when you watch this. And thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see what I'm doing between videos, you can check me out on Instagram or you can check me out on Patreon, where I give you guys updates on my book and my writing and my progress on writing and publishing in general. Until next time, my friends, happy reading, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.